Hi, this is Selectman Bill McDevitt with another issue of All About Town. And today we're talking about the voter's guide for the March election, March 10th, 2015 at Pelham High School. And this is the town and school elections. What I'm going to talk about is the town side and run through the voter's guide. Now, you're going to get one mailed to your house, depending on when you're watching this program. You may already have gotten it. I thought it would be useful just to take a few minutes and go through it, and we're going to have a guest or two also to touch on some of the warrant articles. Now, Jim Greenwood's going to put on the screen what the warrant article wording is, and I'm not going to read those all to you because you can read, but it's important to just touch on them. The first article is to elect town officers, and that's something that is done by secret ballot, of course, at the town meeting session. We're not going to go over that. There's quite a few open positions, and some people have signed up for them, and I'm not sure that all of them have somebody signed up. If you haven't signed up, it's too late. There is a statutory requirement for when to sign up to run for office, but in any event, that will be on the voter's guide when you get it, and you'll see signs around town as to who's running for things. The second article is a amendment to the zoning ordinance. The explanation is rather lengthy, but let me try and simplify it. Some years ago, the town implemented so-called impact fees, which is an additional fee to be tacked on to the price of a new house, basically. That goes to support future needs for fire stations, for schools, and so on and so forth. There's many rules, regulations, and laws surrounding impact fees, and I'm not going to pretend to touch on every one of them. But there was some confusion because the town got sued a year or two ago by a group of builders who wanted to get the impact fees returned to them. And again, I'm going to skip the long and the short of it, but basically the court said, no, you have no right to ask for these fees. Even if they were going to be returned to anybody, you're not the right people. So the attempt in this zoning ordinance, which is Article 2, is to clarify who gets an impact fee if there is a refund. So it's a lengthy explanation. The article can be confusing, but that's pretty much what it is. This will avoid future confusion on behalf of people who think they might be entitled to a refund, but they're not. That's the town budget. And the budget is submitted by the Budget Committee. It was $13,773,308. It's a slight increase from last year's. This is the complete operating budget for the town. The town side only, remember, it doesn't include the schools. And there's a provision, as you'll see in the voter's guide, for what we call a default budget. And that is, if this budget fails, if you, the voters, vote no in a majority, then there is another budget that takes place. That default budget is designed to make sure that the town keeps going without the necessity of continual town meetings happening by secret ballot, where everybody has a chance to vote on a budget until it passes. So the default budget kicks in. Essentially, a default budget is last year's budget plus any statutory or contractual requirements which would bind the selectmen and the town for 2015. Article 4 has to do with the highway grant. You pay highway taxes in your gas taxes, which go to support town highways and state highways. We get a share here in Pelham, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $266,000 this year. This, if you pass it, will give us the authority, the selectmen the authority, to accept the grant and to spend it for the maintenance of roads. If you didn't give us that authority, we couldn't spend it for the maintenance of roads. Article 5 is to put money in the Senior Center Capital Reserve Fund. A capital reserve fund is a savings account. It's defined by state law, has a lot of ifs, ands, or buts around it, but basically it's a savings account. By putting money into this savings account, into the capital reserve fund, the idea here that the selectmen have is to save some money. The bus has to be replaced. When the bus is replaced, we'll be able to do it with less impact on taxes. If you haven't seen the seniors bus, it picks up a lot of seniors, takes them to lunch, take someone on an occasional shopping trip. It's not one of those gigantic buses, it's a small bus. I don't know if it holds 30 or 40 people at max. But it's overparked behind the senior center off Nashville Road. It will need to be replaced at some point. Next is Article 6. This is the collective bargaining agreement between the town, the Board of Selectmen, and the professional firefighters of Pelham. And I have Brian McCarthy, the town administrator, who was the point person in negotiating this contract from the Board of Selectmen. So Brian, would you tell us briefly what this, the money in here is made up of, and whether there was anything else in the contract besides increases?
Primarily, the increases are with, it's a 5-year contract, which I think the previous contract was a 4-year. And what we've agreed to is 2% a year, which is the standard percentage for all of the contracts in the area. When we were looking into negotiating contracts, I took a look around and see what other municipalities, other fire departments, other police departments, what they were getting for increases. And 2% was pretty much the number that was out there. So we offered a 2% raise, and we went with a 5-year contract for primarily because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stagger the contracts so that the police contract and the fire contract and the support contract, they're not all on the same ballot in 1 year.
And the reason is, if I can interject, is because you're the one who negotiates from the town side.
That's correct.
So doing 3 in 1 year is very difficult.
Very
it may
difficult.
be unfair to everybody involved.
Very difficult, and I think if we can get into this trend of staggering the contracts, where we have the police 1 year, fire the next year, support, and this will help spread the money out, and so that when the citizens come in and look at the warrant articles, they're not inundated with contracts and things like that. So the goal is that if we can get these contracts to pass, we will be in a situation that the contracts for at least the next couple of years will not be in the same calendar year.
Is this mostly a 2% increase, or are there other benefits in things making up this number?
It's a 2% across the board.
Okay.
2%.
There's no big changes in insurance or anything like that?
Insurance has not changed.
Okay.
The really what we the baseline I used for negotiating was what was agreed upon last year that was not supported by the voters. Okay. Last year, the fire and the
that
town.
That came down last year.
Right, they negotiated a contract, and then it didn't meet muster with the voters, so when we went into negotiations this year, I used that contract as a baseline to build.
Okay.
And essentially, it was a great negotiation. The fire department came to the table, and we had open, honest negotiations, and they made some concessions. The town made some concessions that were fair to everybody. Nobody left these negotiations, like, hey, we got one over them.
Okay, everybody feels like
it's a fair contract. It benefits the town and it benefits the fire department.
And you made some language changes too.
A lot of language changes.
Just cleaning up old contracts.
Yeah, when I looked at that contract, there were a lot of clauses and terminology in there that just simply did not apply to today.
Okay.
We would look at some sections and it would talk about hours of work or something like that, and I would say, what where is this relevant today? Well, that was language that was just left in there from previous contracts. So we all agreed to, once we got a tentative agreement, to go through the contract from page 1 right to the end, remove or eradicate this old language that does not have any bearing at all to anybody today, and a clear, concise, easy to read contract, which will hopefully not have a lot of questions. People can read it and understand it, and it's in plain language.
I think much of that applies to Article 7, which is the contract for, the official name is the Pelham Public Works and Municipal Employees Union. And just to touch on this is transfer station employees, highway department employees, a number of employees in town
hall employees.
I think that pretty well covers the waterfront. And this is similar to the other contract in terms of its increases?
2%, again, that's the
Okay.
same number we used for both the fire and the support. 2% across the board. This is a 4-year contract, not a 5.
Again, consistent with you're trying to,
Trying to stagger the
Stagger them a little
contracts
bit.
so that we
Okay.
don't have them coming in every year. And again, just some really good spirited negotiations between the town and the support union personnel. And we, likewise with the fire department, we went through that contract and we vetted all of old language, old
okay, got
terminology.
rid of all of it.
Got rid of it all,
Okay,
so
good.
that we have a nice, clean contract, easy to read. And again, like the fire department, the town made some concessions, the support union made some concessions as well. A very fair deal for both sides.
Okay. Well, the voters will have a chance to take a look at these on March 10th, and if they have any questions between any time that they should watch this and March 10th, they should direct them to you, and you'll
Absolutely.
answer the
Please
questions.
call me if you have any questions, and I do hope you support both of these contracts. One thing that I would like to say is that we really are very fortunate to have great staff. The fire department are a great group of guys and gals, the support union again, and it's very difficult to replace institutional knowledge.
And seasoned employees.
And seasoned
Yeah,
employees, it really is.
Sure,
And,
yeah.
and I looked at some studies this year on the costs associated with, if you get somebody that leaves, then you have to fill that void until you hire someone, and then you go through the hiring process. And then you get them, up to snuff and running. It ends up costing a lot more money to replace people than it does to try and retain them. And that was another goal of ours, was to try and just negotiate a fair deal so that we keep our good employees. Good employees are very hard to come by in this day and age. And that was another objective of these contracts, is to make it so that, again, it's fair for the town, fair for the employees, and also we keep that employee retention. Very
Right.
important.
Well, this is a great summary. I appreciate you taking the time to come and give it to us.
Great, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
McDevitt.
Moving on to Article 8. This is the one that asks you to put some money aside, $30,000, in the Compensated Absence Trust Fund. Once upon a time, some of the contracts that we had in place, some of the collective bargaining agreements and other agreements, provided that if you didn't use sick time and vacation time, you could bank this money, and we would pay the employee when they terminated the amount of money that we owe them for that time. We don't have those provisions any longer, but we still have some holdovers from when we had them before, and there is an unfunded liability of $594,000. Now, frankly, it would require everyone who has this money coming to them to leave in the same year that we'd have to pay it all out, and that's not likely. Plus, we have $162,000 in the fund, but what this asks to do is to put some additional funds aside so that should the worst come to worst, we would be able to meet the liability that we have on this. As I said, we don't have it anymore, and it's something that we wouldn't, I don't think, reinstitute, but we still owe this, and we owe this to the people who worked under those conditions. All right, moving on to Article 9, and Article 9, as you can see, has to do with hiring a communications center supervisor for the police department. So I'm very happy today to have Captain Steve Toom of the police department here to explain and to answer my questions about what this position is. So first of all, Steve, welcome. Good to have you here.
Good to
First
be here.
time appearance on this cable TV show,
Yes.
anyway.
Yes.
This is an interesting warrant article. I know the chief came in, it seems to me, 2 years ago, and he may have mentioned it somewhat casually to the Board of Selectmen at the end of his budget presentation. And I know my feeling at the time was, oh, geez, what do we need this for? He came in this year and made a pretty good case for what this person is and why we need them. But the voters, many of them, haven't heard that. So could you tell us, first of all, let me ask you, what is the communication center?
That is a dispatch center for all emergency services in the town of Pelham.
Fire, police?
Fire, police, ambulance.
Somebody calls 911, does that wind up here? in
It does
some
wind up
fashion, too?
right at the dispatch center of the police department.
Okay, all right. Or if I walk in off the street with an emergency or even non-emergency?
Yeah, you would see one of our dispatchers.
Still
That's
the
the first
same person.
contact you would have
Okay,
in the
so
police department.
So that's staffed 24/7, obviously.
Yes, correct.
Right. I do recall visiting a police department up north some years ago, and there was a little sign on the door, it's, our hours are 9 to 5, if after 5 o'clock, please dial 911.
Fortunately, we have a 24-hour service
we
here,
do.
which is very
So,
fortunate.
why does this person need people need a supervisor? I assume that there's enough knowledge in there that we don't need that, so tell us about it.
Well, right now, a sworn officer is running the dispatch center, and what a dispatch supervisor would do would take over a lot of the responsibilities for that sworn officer that the sworn officer is now doing.
So why is that a problem? In other words, someone in uniform is what you're saying is supervising it.
Yep.
But, so what?
They're not a dispatch supervisor would be hired to have all the technical skills to deal with the communications of radios, the dispatch software, the 911, the NCIC entries, and that's more a supervisor would be more able to do that better than a sworn officer.
Have
It's
the
a different job.
knowledge and expertise.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, it would relieve that sworn officer so he could do other functions.
All right, the objective of that sworn officer that we have today isn't to sit in there and to supervise. I assume they have other duties that the supervision is an add-on.
Correct, yeah. And another good point for a dispatch supervisor would be that they could actually, help out when the times are busy, because we have one dispatcher that works all the time. With a dispatcher supervisor, that's having another person there able to do the dispatch job and help out when it's busy, cover open shifts, or if someone's sick, which would help alleviate the overtime budget in that sense. So
Okay, so that today if someone's out, obviously you have to have a replacement.
right,
So that replacement is either another dispatcher,
correct,
but there's a limit to how much overtime and how much straight, how long that person can work continuously and still stay awake.
correct, yes.
Or who else fills in today? If that person is sick, who else fills in?
It would have to be another dispatcher. If,
All right, could an officer fill in?
no,
Okay.
there are some cross-trained officers that
Yeah.
are trained to do the dispatch, but there's only a few of those, but they could, yes.
So but not every officer can sit down
No.
and start working?
No,
Okay.
no.
Um,
It's a specialty that you have to be trained in.
And I know that from my personal experience and listening to the radio transmissions when we had the house fire on Blackstone,
Mhm.
a very sad event. Thank God we don't have too many of those things going in town. I know the dispatcher was about as busy as a human being could be.
Absolutely.
And I'm speaking from my own personal perspective. That what seems like an instance where had there been a supervisor to come in, they could have covered for some of the things that she had to do that night.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is both. Fortunately for us, we were training a dispatcher at the time, so there was actually 2 on during the fire,
Okay,
which
okay.
was very fortunate for us. But yes, in that situation, a dispatch supervisor like myself or the chief or Lieutenant Perriello would respond in a time of need because they would be the salaried employee, so
Okay.
they'd come to
Now,
work.
is this dispatch supervisor going to be a police officer? A sworn
No.
police officer?
No.
It's a civilian employee of the police department?
Yes, correct.
Okay, much as the dispatchers are today.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So what kind of training does this person have to go through? Do we send them off to school, or how do we train this civilian supervisor?
Well, one of the requirements, there'll be an experienced dispatcher already, so that
Okay,
yeah.
all right, so you're gonna be looking for someone
who's already, yes.
okay, so
That's
this
gonna
could
be
be
some of the
it could be a
criteria.
promotion for someone, or
Right.
it could be someone from outside. I don't know, I haven't had this discussion with you or the chief, but
Yeah.
the idea is move somebody up or hire someone outside. And
Correct.
then they would have to train their replacement.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a school for this?
They do have dispatch schools. For instance, there's a communications training officer school where we have two of our dispatchers currently are certified training officers, meaning that they can train other dispatchers
Oh,
to be
okay,
dispatchers.
okay.
And there is supervised. There'd be management training like they have for myself, the lieutenant, or the chief. There's kind of trainings that's designed for dispatch supervisors.
And there's a certain amount of legally required confidentiality that goes along with this job?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I just couldn't walk in there and start reading what was on the screen.
Yeah, no, yes, they have to be certified through the state for, it's called spots, but it's how you run your criminal histories and driver's license and stuff. So you have to be certified in order to view that screen.
Okay.
Like, the public can't view that screen.
Okay.
You have to be either sworn police officer or dispatch
Okay.
that's get the training.
Okay. Well, this is very interesting. I think at least we have a good sense of why we need this supervisor.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we should add at this point in time? Have we overlooked anything?
No, I don't think we've overlooked everything. I just hope the town gets out and votes. Either way.
That's the critical thing.
Yeah, either way they vote,
Okay.
yes or no, but just the most important thing is to get out there and vote, and hopefully they do support this and for the police department.
Thank you very much. Appreciate Captain Toom coming in and giving us his thoughts on this position. Article 10 is raising and appropriating $36,000 for the Forest Maintenance Fund. And by the way, as far as the way the warrant articles are worded, they have to say raise and appropriate. The state requires us to say that for these. But the truth is, this will be raised from an already existing fund in this particular case, and it says it in the warrant article. It comes from revenues produced from timber harvesting, from sale of timber. The Forestry Committee and the Conservation Commission works every year on regular professional timber harvesting of town lands, and any money from those sales, net proceeds, go into the account from which they're asking you to withdraw this money. Article 11 is on Raymond Park, and it's really very, very similar in everything I just said. The only difference is, and if you get your voter's guide and you read this, you'll see the difference in Raymond Park is that years ago, town meeting, you the voters, decided to keep Raymond Park separate so that any timber funds raised in Raymond Park will go in strictly to Raymond Park. They can't be spent for other parks. Article 10, the prior one, that money can be spent for any other parks or forests, but not money from timber harvesting at Raymond. So this has to take some of that money out of the Raymond Park Fund that we've already put in there. It's not property taxes, neither was the prior article. These don't involve property taxes. And this is to do some additional maintenance at Raymond Park. Article 12 is long, complicated, and has to do with the Willow Street Bridge. And I'll be as brief as possible. Again, this is one of these articles that I think we all wish wasn't worded the way it is, but it has to be, so that it's clear in terms of what we're doing and why we're doing it. The state reimburses towns for 80% of the expenses that they incur in replacing bridges, town bridges. The Willow Street Bridge is too narrow. It has some guardrail issues. It is inadequate. It's not on the red list yet, which is the danger list from the state, but it's inadequate. It's been on the inadequate list, I think, since 1991 or 1992. It really needs to be addressed. In addition, the flood study that you approved and that the selectmen implemented by a firm called VHB had some comments about the Willow Street Bridge damming up water behind it and some changes that need to be made. So what this seeks to do is to provide the opportunity for the engineering and design funds to be raised and spent toward the Willow Street Bridge project. And then when we raise and appropriate this money, at some point we will get 80% of it back from the state. You can read the explanation. It's also lengthy, but it's worth spending some time on. The same thing really applies to Article 13, which is money for the Abbott Bridge that runs over Old Bridge Street. That's the double stone arch bridge, the oldest surviving, functioning double stone arch bridge in the state of New Hampshire, built during the Andrew Jackson administration when there were surplus government funds, if you can believe that. But this has shown up on the red list. We rebuilt this about 10, 15 years ago, and it is a historical monument. It was restored as much as possible to resemble the original bridge, using the original stones and the original construction methods. But it's turned out that there are some more water that flows through there now, and it's begun to scour away the bridge piers, basically removing sand, gravel, and silt from the area where the piers sit. That can't go on forever, so the state has put this on the red list. So what the selectmen are asking your approval to do through this article is to appropriate some money so that we can begin the engineering, design, and permitting process for the Abbott Bridge. It will not change the way it looks, the way it feels. It's going to be the same structure. There are some issues which are not relative to this warrant article about perhaps constructing a way to get more water around the Abbott Bridge. And we will look at that at some point, but this really just has to do with looking at the scouring so that we can fix that. Article 14 is the noise ordinance, and that can be confusing. We've been approached by a number of people to see if we couldn't have a noise ordinance in town. I hear the police department occasionally gets calls from people saying, my neighbor's making too much noise, there's too loud a party, or the fireworks are too noisy, so on and so forth. We don't have a noise ordinance, and thus the police department really are somewhat unable or helpless other than to make a polite request to keep the noise down. Most people do, but not everyone does. So we've been approached by a number of people to have a noise ordinance in place. What Article 14 does is just gives us the green light to develop one. It's probably 2016 town meeting. If the selectmen develop a noise ordinance, they'll be back to you asking you to sign off on the specifics. Some people have said, well, is this a certain amount of decibels or this, that, or the other? We haven't figured that out yet, and you'll know that in 2016 when you have a chance to read the article that comes as a result of this. Article 15 is kind of an interesting one. Some months ago, the library trustees decided that they wanted to have some sort of a wine tasting as a fundraiser in the library, only to discover that a long-standing town ordinance passed by town meeting many years ago, back in the late 70s and early 80s, prohibits such a thing. They can't consume alcoholic beverages on town land or in town buildings. So the idea behind this article is to ask for your permission to grant one-day permits for the consumption of alcohol so that people like the library trustees or friends of the library could have a fundraiser and serve wine. Now, understand something. The state has a raft of regulations. If you approve this warrant article and the selectmen give somebody a one-day permit, that's only the beginning of what they have to do. In order to serve alcohol at a function like this, the state has all kinds of requirements, including training and so on and so forth. For those of you who might be curious, we did check with the town's insurance company, and there is no additional cost to the voters, to the town to do this. It doesn't increase our premium or anything like that. So that's a reasonable question that people do ask. Let's move on to 16, 17, and let's do 16 and 17 kind of together. It's 18 also, 16, 17, 18. It's a fairly rare thing for the town to have to auction off property which was taken for non-payment of property taxes. The last time this was done that any of us can remember was about 20 years ago. And in fact, it's a long story. I think it actually worked out very well for the people involved in a convoluted sort of a way. In this case, however, we have three properties, two with homes on them. One is just a vacant parcel, where the amount of money owed is substantial. The two homes are vacant, and we can't sell that land. We own those. We own the houses. We own the land right now. And in fact, the town has to pay property insurance on those, on the houses, just like you would. And there's no value to you, the taxpayer, or to the Board of Selectmen to own these properties. We need to sell them, and the way that you do it in New Hampshire is you get you, the voter, to give us permission to do it. Selectmen can't sell any town land or a town building without your approval. And when you give us permission, the way it will be done is by a public auction, by a state licensed auctioneer. You've seen ads in the paper. this, that, the other being sold. Sometimes towns do that too, and we will be joining them. So 16, 17, and 18, they're different parcels. 18 is a vacant approximately 1 acre piece of land. Article 19 is very different. It's also relative to selling a piece of land off William Drive, but this is to a specific individual. Again, Jim's put the wording up there so you can see what it says. This person came to the Conservation Commission and asked if we would sell vacant town-owned land that's located off William Drive. The Conservation Commission looked at it. The selectmen asked them to. Is there any reason why we should keep this land? Does it have a conservation value? The answer was no, except the Conservation said, if you sell it to this individual, we would like to have a requirement in the deed that the parcels remain undeveloped. There's 2 parcels. There's a little teeny weeny one for 0.31 of an acre that's sort of stuck in the middle of this other one. It didn't make sense to sell the larger 16-acre parcel without putting the other one in there too. So this is to ask your permission to sell the land. It would remain undeveloped, so it would remain effectively conservation land, but it wouldn't be town land anymore. We can't sell it without your approval. Article 20 is, this allows the trustees of the trust funds to invest money differently. The state made a change in the way that you're allowed to invest money, but the trustees of the trust funds who take care of things like capital reserve funds and whatnot, town savings accounts, that like the senior bus capital reserve fund, they invest that money, they take good care of it. This allows them to invest money in a couple of different ways that they don't do today. So that in a nutshell is the voter's guide. Please take time to take a look at it. If there's another voter in your household or 2, share it with them so they have an understanding. I'm sure the school board will be putting out a voter's guide too. I don't have that in hand, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to go over it. But look at the school voter's guide when you get it, so you have a good understanding. And the critical thing is make sure that you vote, so that we don't have a 27% turnout like we did a couple of years ago. Let's make this a much larger percentage. Thanks very much for watching. We appreciate that. And cut.